Yo, what is up, guys? Delboy here. So, as we know, this past weekend, Peter Quillin suffered the second defeat of his career in a shock upset to Alfredo Angulo, and at 36 years old, basically the guy's career is done. And it got me thinking about, his management over the years, and not only that, PBC fighters' management over the last few years. And by the way, this isn't a video criticising all PBC fighters. Some PBC fighters have done some good things in the last couple of years. For example, Errol Spence, he's fighting Sean Porter. That's coming up soon. His career is on the up, as is Deontay Wilder's, for example. But there's a lot of guys over at the PBC who are basically in no man's land. They are not fighting enough, and they're not showing any interest in taking big, tough fights. And for me, Peter Quillin is the poster boy for that type of fighter. He is the poster boy for PBC mediocrity. Now, I'm sure we will get a few PBC fanboys come over, hit the dislike, say their bit, and, go about their merry day. That's fine, but at least have the attention span to listen to a whole video, then make your point. Don't just read the title and automatically say I'm hating. At least listen to the video, that's all I'm asking. But anyway, I've been following Peter Quillin's career for quite some time, before he became a world champion. I remember when this man was on the come up, when he was fighting the likes of Craig McEwen, who was a Scottish fighter. The fight before he fought Peter Quillin, he gave Andy Lee a really tough fight. After that, he fought Winky Wright. Now, Winky Wright was past his best, but still a good name. I remember Peter Quillin on the come up, and he was viewed as a good prospect with a good future. Big middleweight with power, fairly athletic, tall, long, etc, etc. The guy was seen as a good prospect. After that, he won the world title, the WBO world middleweight title, against Hassan and Dam. And at that point, he was a world champion with a very good record and was in the position to take some really big fights. He had a few defences of that belt. He fought a couple of decent guys. He fought Gabe Rosado. That was an okay win. He also fought Andy Lee to a draw. That was a good fight. But after that fight, he was in the position where he really needed to push on. But after the Andy Lee fight, he was mandated to fight Matt Korobov, his mandatory challenger, but he ducked that fight, despite being offered, I think, $1.5 million. He ducked that fight, gave up his title. After that, he fought Michael Zarafa in a Stay Busy, and then fought Danny Jacobs for the fake WBA belt. And that's where he cashed out. And, after that fight, Peter Quillin really wasn't a factor. He was content with cashing out against Jacobs in a fake world title fight. If the guy was serious, he would have fought Matt Korobov and then went on to fight Danny Jacobs. But no, under the orders of his promotional team, he vacated that belt. That just highlighted the lack of faith and the lack of expectations the PBC had in Peter Quillin. They didn't even believe in this guy to fight Matt Korobov in a mandated fight where they didn't have full control, where they were in a position where they could lose a belt from their stable. And that type of management, to me, isn't effective. And we've seen quite a few cases of that, PBC fighters being totally unwilling to fight guys from another stable. Peter Quillin, a prime example. His career's ruined now. He never developed. He would have been much better off taking that Korobov fight. Whatever happened would have happened, and he could have moved on from there. But no, he never wanted that fight. He vacated the belt. That really left a bad taste in fans' mouths. And he fought Jacobs, got splattered. Where is he now? Career ruined, career over. He was pampered, he was mollycoddled, and now it's career over. Korobov at the time was unbeaten. He was hyped. That would have been a good fight for Peter Quillin's development. But no, we never got it. And listen, there are several fighters in the PBC who are in a similar position, fighting once a year, maybe twice a year at best, fighting absolute garbage competition. Look at Jamal Charlo, for example. Who's that guy fighting? Who's he fighting? How often is he fighting? Not very often. But he's content on fighting absolute no-hopers, picking up decent paydays for fighting absolute sea-level competition. Now, if you're one of those clowns out there who count other people's money, you may be happy with that. I'm not one of those people. I'm a boxing fan. I want to see Jermall Charlo fight good guys at middleweight. It's not happening. And the PBC show no sign of, forcing this guy to take tough fights. They are showing no signs of letting this guy, fight other guys on different networks. He's content to stay behind that PBC badge and, pick up easy paydays. He doesn't want no smoke. He's content milking that fake WBC belt. That's just what it is. And that's the culture the PBC create amongst certain fighters. And that is plain to see. I don't give a damn what anybody says. There's far too many fighters in the PBC who are content on not doing very much at all. Like I said, Jermall Charlo, Leo Santa Cruz, Gervonta Davis, guys like this. Gary Russell Jr. fighting once a year. Who's he fighting? I'm a boxing fan. I like all of these fighters. I think they're very good. But, if they're fighting once a year and fighting nobodies, I'm not really going to be that interested. And then I look at a reason why they're fighting once a year, and there's a pattern amongst the PBC fighters. These guys, first and foremost, need to be more active. If they cannot get big fights for whatever reason, at least be active. I'm talking 3 or 4 fights a year. There's no reason why you can only fight Brandon Adams in a year. That guy's not a top 20 middleweight. If you're fighting that level of competition as a world-rated fighter, ideally you need to be fighting 3 or 4 times a year to keep sharp, to stay busy. But a lot of these guys are wasting away, they are not developing, they are missing out on certain experiences, and when they actually do eventually step up, they're going to get found out like Peter Quillin, and they will never recover. Peter Quillin should be a warning to a lot of these guys. I see a lot of talented fighters out there on the PBC side of things who need to be doing more. I'm talking about guys like Leo Santa Cruz, Gary Russell Jr., Gervonta Davis, Jermall Charlo. I think all of these guys are very good, or at least have the potential to be very good, but they are not doing anything. And listen, I don't get how these PBC fanboys can come over here and say, oh, you're just hating on the PBC, you just don't like Al Heyman. I don't get how they can say that, and then turn around, look at the recent schedule, and say that's been good value, or good for boxing fans. I don't get it. For me, the PBC this year have been fairly disappointing. Have they put on a couple of good cards? Of course. I really enjoyed Thurman Pacquiao. I'm looking forward to Porter Spence. I loved Caleb Plant versus Jose Uzcategui. Great cards, I thoroughly enjoyed them. And there were a couple of more really good cards. So I'm not sitting here saying the PBC has been total trash, because it hasn't. But, first and foremost, for the roster they have, the talent they have at their disposal, I think they should be putting on a lot more fights, a lot better fights. Fights like Leo Santa Cruz versus Gary Russell Jr., for example. Now, there's no reason why that fight shouldn't have been made already. That's never going to be a super fight. No amount of marination will make that a big fight amongst casuals. That's a hardcore fight that should have been made quite some time ago, but it's not been made. The fights at welterweight, now they are being made, but look how long it's taken. Look at guys like Jermall Charlo fighting Brandon Adams. You've got a guy in Chris Eubank Jr. signed with Al Heyman. Make that fight. Eubank Jr., he's a small 168 pounder. He can still make middleweight. Make that fight. Again, never going to be a super fight, but it's a good fight now. Make it. There's so many fights they could make, but they're not doing it. All I'm saying is, I'm looking at this from the perspective of a boxing fan. And for me, they are not putting on sufficiently good cards for the talent they have available. That's what I'm saying. Obviously, Benavidez has a fight coming up against Anthony Durrell. Now, Benavidez is expected to win that fight, but I've heard recent news of Caleb Plant maybe having one more fight in the interim while they wait on that fight between Plant and Benavidez. Why? Again, never going to be a super fight. Make it now. Make it sooner rather than later. The PBC should have learned their lesson when Jarrett Hurd got upset by Julian Williams, or when Jamel Charlo got upset by Tony Harrison. That was the fight at the time. Jamel Charlo versus Jarrett Hurd. But obviously that never happened. And here we are, quite a few months later, we are still no closer to that big unification fight at 154 involving 3 of the 4 major sanctioning belts. But anyway, to me, certain guys at the PBC have got away with doing very little, and, they've been basically given a free ride, and as a result, they've been content with picking up easy paydays, fighting subpar competition, and, I see this over at the PBC. We might have a generation of fighters who never really fulfilled their potential because of that type of management. But there we go, that's just my 2 cents. Again, I'm only saying this from a perspective as a boxing fan, not a fan of a certain promoter, not a fan of a certain fighter. That's the difference. But anyway, share your thoughts below. Peace.